Bring the coffee, intern. The words did not just cut through the boardroom. They slid across the polished mahogany table like motor oil on a wet highway. That was Gavin Croft. He was 55 years old, sporting a deep tan from tax-deductible golf trips to Cabo, and possessed the intellectual depth of a puddle in a parking lot. Gavin was the kind of guy who thought synergy was a personality trait, and that a corporate code of conduct was a list of suggestions he could ignore whenever he pleased. I paused, the porcelain cup rattling slightly against its saucer, not from fear, but from the sheer physical effort it took not to pour the boiling dark roast directly into his lap. I placed it right here, Mr. Croft, I said, keeping my voice flat and neutral. I set the coaster down with the precision of a bomb disposal technician. Now sit in the back. He waved his hand dismissively, not even looking up. He was too busy scrolling through stock option charts or checking a message from his mistress. Adults are talking. Try not to breathe too loud, Roger. I walked past the empty leather chairs at the main table, chairs that cost more than most people make in half a year, and took my spot on a folding metal chair against the wall, the spectator seat. Let us get one thing straight before we go any further. I am not an intern. I am 58 years old. I have an MBA that has been collecting dust for decades, and my tolerance for corporate posturing evaporated somewhere around 2012. But to Gavin and this boardroom of necrotic suits, I was just Roger from admin, just a quiet body to fetch files, pour caffeine, and absorb their casual disrespect like a sponge. I sat down, pulling a notepad from my bag. Gavin cleared his throat, a sound like a garbage disposal grinding a rusty spoon. All right, let us get this over with, Gavin announced, leaning back and unbuttoning his suit jacket. Item 1, the third quarter budget overrun. I know, the numbers look red, but you have to spend money to make money, gentlemen. The retreat in Aspen was essential for team building. I wrote in my notebook, Aspen retreat equals $145,000. Return on investment equals 0. Gavin liver damage equals significant. Essential, piped up Davis, a nervous board member who looked like he was constantly expecting a ceiling tile to fall on him. Gavin, we missed our logistics targets by 12%. The warehouse in Ohio is literally held together by duct tape and prayers, and we spent 6 figures on lift tickets. Gavin laughed. It was a wet, dismissive sound. Davis, you are looking at the trees. I am looking at the forest. We secured the tentative agreement with the distributors, did we not? They signed a non-binding letter of intent, Gavin. Davis stammered. That is not a contract. That is a napkin doodle. It is morale, Davis. Gavin slammed his hand on the table. This is why you are still driving a sedan. No vision. Look, the vote to approve the retroactive bonuses for the executive committee is on the table. All in favor? Hands went up. Automatic and Pavlovian, like trained seals barking for a fish, except the fish was a $50,000 quarterly bonus. And the seals were grown men with mortgages they could not afford. I watched them. I watched the light from the projector hit the sheen of sweat on Gavin's forehead. I watched the other board members, men my father had hired, men my father had trusted, averted their eyes from the glaring red numbers on the screen. They were vultures picking a carcass, too busy eating to realize the animal was not dead yet. It was just hibernating. My father founded this company, Vance Logistics, trucking, warehousing, gritty, greasy, real work. He started with one beat-up Ford haul and gravel in 1978. He built it into a regional empire with blood, sweat, and a refusal to cut corners. He died 2 years ago. And in those 2 years, Gavin Croft, a man my father brought on as a consultant to help with modernization, had turned it into his personal bank account. They thought I was just the son who did not want the throne. The quiet one, the one who took a low-level analyst job because he did not have the head for business. Gavin turned to me, catching me staring. He winked. Do not worry, Roger. Maybe next year we will have a budget for a new coffee machine. That stuff you brought is lukewarm. I will make a note of it, I said. My pen dug into the paper so hard it tore through 3 sheets. Item 1. Remove the board member who thinks the majority shareholder is an intern. See, Gavin missed a detail. When my father died, he did not leave the voting shares to the board. He did not leave them to a trust managed by Gavin. He left everything, 51% of the controlling interest, to a shell company called Red Earth Holdings. Gavin thought he was Red Earth. He thought the name was in homage to him because he once owned a landscaping business. Narcissism is a powerful drug. It blinds you better than moonshine. He did not know that red earth referred to the red clay soil in Georgia, where my father was born. He did not know that the sole signatory on that LLC was me. And he definitely did not know that for the last 6 months, I had not just been bringing coffee. I had been counting votes. I had been tracking every single cent he siphoned off to his dummy consulting firms. I was not an intern. I was the exterminator, and I was just waiting for the roaches to gather in one place. Meeting adjourned, Gavin announced, checking his Rolex. I have a tea time at 3. Keep the engine running, gentlemen. As they shuffled out, laughing and slapping backs, the smell of their cologne lingered, a mix of sandalwood and unearned entitlement. I stayed in my metal chair. I waited until the room was empty, the silence settling like dust. Then the door creaked. One man had stayed behind. Howard, the oldest member of the board. He walked over to the coffee pot, poured the dregs into a cup, and looked at me. He did not smile. He did not sneer. Coffee is fine, Roger. Always was. Thanks, Howard. He is going to sell the fleet, Howard said, staring into his black coffee. He is talking to a liquidation firm next month. He wants to pivot to asset-light logistics, which means firing the drivers and renting trucks we do not own. I know, I said. Your dad would have put him through a wall, Howard muttered. Dad was a brawler, Howard. I stood up, smoothing my shirt. I am not. Howard looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. No, you are not. You are something else. I am just the intern, I said, picking up the tray of dirty cups. But Howard, yeah? Do not sell your shares yet. He raised a bushy eyebrow. Why? Because, I said, walking to the door, the price is about to go up. Or down. Depends on which side of the table you are sitting on when the music stops, the office. At 8 p.m. is a different beast than the office at 8 a.m. In the morning, it is a theater of performative busyness. People power walking with empty folders and phones ringing just to prove they exist. The hum of fluorescent anxiety fills the air. But at night, the building exhales. The air conditioning rattles like a smoker cough. The darkness stretches out over the cubicles, turning the open-plan floor into a graveyard of abandoned ambitions. This was my time. I sat in my cubicle, a beige box nestled between the copier and the restroom. Excellent location if you enjoy the smell of ozone and chemical air freshener. But I was not logging into my standard administrative assistant profile. Instead, I pulled a folder of legal documents from my briefcase. Some people think corporate warfare requires illegal hacking or spy gadgets. It does not. The most devastating weapons in the business world are printed on paper and backed by federal statutes. 6 weeks ago, I had initiated my legal opening move. Under Delaware General Corporation Law, specifically Section 220, any shareholder has the right to inspect the corporation books and records upon written demand stating a proper purpose. As the sole owner of Red Earth Holdings, which held a significant block of shares, I had my lawyer, Sarah, deliver a formal, notarized Section 220 demand to the executive office. Gavin had laughed it off, directing the corporate legal team to stall and bury us in paperwork. He figured a minor shareholder could not afford the legal fees to fight back. He was wrong. Sarah immediately filed an expedited action in the Delaware Court of Chancery. The court did not appreciate Gavin's stalling tactics. The judge issued an order compelling Vance Logistics to produce all general ledgers, bank statements, and vendor contracts related to discretionary spending within 5 business days. The documents arrived in digital crates, and for the last week, I had been dissecting them. I opened my laptop, pulling up the files produced under the court order. I opened the folder labeled General Ledger Discretionary. Let us see what you have been up to, Gavin, I muttered. I scanned the entries. Page 4, consulting fees paid to Peak Technical Solutions, $45,000. Page 12, retainer for strategic advisory, Peak Technical Solutions, $60,000. Page 28, miscellaneous logistics coordination, Peak Technical Solutions, $32,000. I had already run a background check on Peak Technical Solutions. Their registered address was a P.O. box in a strip mall in Delaware, right next to a dry cleaner and a vape shop. The sole officer listed on the incorporation documents was a man named Jared Darren, a known associate of Gavin from his old landscaping days. This was not consulting. This was classic embezzlement. I printed the invoices, my heart hardening with every page that slid out of the tray. It was not just the money. It was the absolute disrespect for what my father had built. My mind flashed back to the funeral. It was raining, a gray Ohio drizzle that soaked into your clothes and chilled you to the bone. Gavin had stood at the podium, fake tears glistening in his eyes, talking about how my father was a pioneer. I remembered standing by the grave afterwards, mud clinging to my boots. Dad had been a hard man, but fair. He had thick calluses on his hands until the day he died. He used to tell me, "Roger, there are two kinds of people. The ones who build the house and the ones who complain about the draft. Do not ever let the complainers run the construction." A week before he passed, he called me into his study. The room smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. He looked small in his leather chair, the cancer having carved away the man who used to lift heavy truck engines by himself. "They are going to come for it, Roger." He had wheezed, his voice thin. "The vultures, Gavin, the banks. They think because you are quiet, you are weak. Show them you are not, but do not fight them like I would. I used a hammer, you use a scalpel. Real power is not written in headlines, son. It is hidden in the bylaws, in the footnotes. That is where you win." He handed me a heavy-bound document, the original Articles of Incorporation from 1978. "Read Clause 14, he whispered, "and do not tell a soul until you are ready to pull the trigger." Back in the dark office, I closed the embezzlement ledger and opened the scanned copy of that old charter. Clause 14, Emergency Governance Protocols, was a dense paragraph of legal jargon that most lawyers would skim over. But translated into plain English, it stated that in the event of documented fiduciary negligence or self-dealing by the sitting chairman, any shareholder possessing more than 15% of voting stock may unilaterally convene an emergency session of the shareholders, bypassing the board of directors entirely, provided they give 48 hours notice. Gavin thought he was safe because he controlled the board. He thought he could vote down any motion I brought forward. But Clause 14 went straight to the shareholders, where the board had no power to stop them. And then I uncovered the crown jewel of Gavin corruption. I opened a PDF file labeled Project Liquid Draft, which was produced under the court order. It was in draft agreement with Summit Asset Management, represented by a guy named Justin. The plan was to sell the company entire trucking fleet for scrap value, lease back the vehicles at exorbitant rates, and use the immediate cash injection to fund massive executive bonuses before the quarterly report was published. It was corporate gutting. But Gavin had made a fatal legal error. To execute this sale quickly, he planned to terminate all 400 company drivers immediately upon signing. I pulled up the federal labor statutes. Under the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, commonly known as the Warning Act, 29 U.S.C., Section 2101, any employer with 100 or more employees must provide 60 days advance written notice of a plant closing or mass layoff. Failing to do so meant the company would be liable for back pay and benefits to every single employee for the period of the violation, along with civil penalties of up to $500 per day. Gavin planned to fire 400 drivers overnight, would instantly expose Vance Logistics to millions of dollars in federal penalties and class action lawsuits. It was a textbook breach of the fiduciary duty of care. He was about to bankrupt the company to line his own pockets. I saved the documents, printing the Project Liquid Draft and the Warning Act citations. I tucked them into the red folder I kept in my desk. The intern was done fetching coffee. It was time to start preparing the legal trap. I logged out, packed my briefcase, and walked to the elevator. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the corporate portal. New agenda item added for Friday board meeting, restructuring of logistics division. He was moving fast. He was pulling the trigger. "Okay, Gavin," I said to the empty elevator. "You want to play Demolition Derby? Let us play." I pressed the button for the lobby, my stomach dropping with anticipation. I had my evidence. Now I needed to secure the rest of the shares. Tuesday morning smelled like burnt bagels and cheap disinfectant in the break room. I was busy unjamming the copier, because apparently an MBA makes you uniquely qualified to pull shredded paper out of a machine that costs more than a mid-sized sedan. As I pulled a crushed sheet from the roller, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text message from Sarah. "Transfer complete, 36% consolidated." I allowed myself a brief smile before returning my face to its usual expression of administrative boredom. Here is how the corporate shell game works. It is not about bags of cash in dark alleys. True corporate warfare is fought with routing numbers and Delaware LLCs. My father, 51% controlling interest, had been sitting in a blind trust in the Cayman Islands. If I moved it all at once to my U.S. holding company, Red Earth Holdings, the regulatory filings would trigger an immediate red flag. Gavin lawyers would get an automated alert. They would freeze the assets and drag the matter into court for years, while Gavin continued to drain the company treasury. I had to be a ghost. I had to be a termite eating the structure from the inside. I had already transferred 15% months ago, keeping it just under the reporting threshold. But to execute Clause 14 and call the emergency meeting, I needed to show a flurry of buying activity from what looked like independent, outside investors. I went back to my desk and opened a spreadsheet. To anyone passing by, it looked like a catering order form for the upcoming gala. In reality, it was my transaction map. I had established 3 new entities: Sunrise Logistics Partners, Ohio Freight Solutions, and Kramer and Associates. I was moving the remaining shares from the Cayman Trust into these 3 separate accounts. 12% to Sunrise, 12% to Ohio Freight, and 12% to Kramer. To Gavin, it would look like random market speculation. Perhaps some investors betting on the liquidation rumors. His vanity would convince him that the market was reacting to his brilliant leadership. Roger, Gavin assistant Sharon, poked her head over my cubicle wall. She looked like a stressed-out chihuahua. Gavin needs the updated profit and loss statements for his lunch meeting, and he wants to know why his dry cleaning is not in his office. The P&L statements are in his inbox. Sharon, I said, typing a command to authorize a $1.5 million wire transfer while keeping eye contact, and his dry cleaning is hanging on the coat rack behind his door. I told him that an hour ago. Well, tell him again. He is stressed. Stressed, I repeated flatly. Right. I pressed enter. The money moved. Kramer and Associates had just acquired another block of shares. I walked the printed profit and loss statements into Gavin's office. He was on the phone, his feet resting on the mahogany desk, a golf club in his hand. He was practicing his putting on a synthetic green that cost more than my first car. Yeah, forget the pension fund, Gavin was saying into his headset, laughing. What are they going to do? Sue us? By the time it goes to court, the entity will not exist. We will be liquid, baby. He saw me and muted the call. Did you bring the mineral water? I asked for the imported stuff. We are out of the imported brand, Mr. Croft, I said, setting the papers down. It is tap water or nothing. Your choice. He blinked, looking confused for a second. Then he laughed. You are getting bold, Roger. I like it. Maybe I will keep you on when we complete the restructuring. You are too kind, I said. As I leaned over to set the documents down, I saw a notepad on his desk. He had scribbled a list of board members' names. Davis, yes. Miller, yes. Howard, no, old fool. Total, we win. He thought he had the votes locked for the liquidation. He thought Howard was the only obstacle. I walked out of his office, my heart hammering against my ribs. He was planning to call the formal vote this Friday. Only 3 days away. My share transfers would not be fully cleared and registered in the corporate ledger for another 48 hours. I was cutting it incredibly close. I needed to delay him. I needed to throw a wrench in the gears to ensure the meeting could not proceed until my shares were fully registered. I walked down to the IT server room. It was cold, noisy, and empty except for Sean, the IT specialist who wore noise-canceling headphones 24/7. I tapped him on the shoulder. He slid one ear cup off. What is up, Roger? Gavin is complaining that the main boardroom projector is flickering, I said. He wants it fixed before the Friday meeting. It is brand new, Sean said, frowning. I just installed it last month. I know, but he insists. Maybe you should take it down for a full diagnostic. It might take a few days to get the replacement parts. Sean shrugged. If I take it down, I have to order a proprietary module. It won't be back up until Monday. Perfect, I said. He will be annoyed, but it is better than having it fail during the presentation. Sure, whatever. Sean put his headphone back. On? Petty? Perhaps. But without the projector, Gavin could not show his polished slides detailing the financial projections of the liquidation. He could not hypnotize the board with colored graphs. He would have to print out the actual contract drafts and financial sheets. And when people are forced to read the actual paper, they start asking questions. I went back to my desk. Step 1, secure the shares. Step 2, execute the transfers. Step 3, delay the enemy. My phone buzzed with a notification from Sunrise Logistics Partners. Transaction pending. Estimated completion, Thursday at 11:59 p.m. The board meeting was Friday at 9 a.m. I was playing chicken with a freight train, and I was riding a bicycle, but the advantage of a bicycle is that you can steer it through tight spaces. Trains can only go where the tracks lead. Roger, Gavin yelled from his office. Where is my water? Coming, Mr. Croft, I called back. I grabbed a bottle of local water from the fridge, peeled off the label, and walked toward his office. Enjoy the comfort while it lasts, Gavin, I thought, because you are about to swallow something very difficult to digest. The annual company gala was held at the Marriott downtown. It was the kind of event that shouted we have too much money and no idea how to spend it. There were ice sculptures of semi-trucks melting under the lights, shrimp cocktails arranged in towering pyramids, and a jazz band playing elevator versions of classic rock songs. I was there not as a guest, but as administrative support. I wore a simple dark suit, carrying a clipboard that gave me the authority to walk around and observe the room without looking out of place. The air smelled of prime rib and corporate greed. Gavin Croft was holding court near the open bar, wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too tight for his frame, his face flushed with gin and unearned confidence. He was surrounded by his loyalists, Davis and Miller, along with Justin from Summit Asset Management. So I told him, Gavin boomed, his voice carrying over the music. If you do not like the severance package, you can take it up with the bankruptcy court, because that is where we will end up if we do not liquidate the fleet. The men laughed, a rich, comfortable sound. They knew they would never be the ones standing in a bankruptcy court. They had golden parachutes. The drivers and warehouse workers had nothing but the pavement. I stood near a decorative pillar, checking names off my list and watching the display. Roger, a voice said. I turned to see Howard. He was wearing a suit that was at least 20 years old, the cuffs showing slight wear. He held a glass of club soda. Quite a spectacle, Howard said quietly. The ice truck is melting, just like our company cash reserves. Gavin is calling the formal vote tomorrow morning, Howard whispered. He could not wait for the projector to be fixed. He had the entire liquidation deck printed on high-gloss paper. Cost a fortune. Of course he did, I said. Howard, do you trust me? I am looking at a firing squad, Roger, and we are the ones standing against the wall. What choice do I have? Tomorrow when you enter the boardroom, do not sit in your usual chair on the right. Sit on the left. Leave the seat at the foot of the table empty. Gavin sits at the head. Who sits at the foot? I will, I said. Howard looked at me, searching my face for any sign of foolishness. He must have seen my father's determination instead. All right, he nodded. I will sit on the left. And Howard, when I start speaking, do not interrupt, no matter what I say. Roger, you are the analyst. If you start lecturing the board, Gavin will have security throw you out of the building. Let him try, I said. Across the room, Gavin raised his glass. To a leaner, more profitable future. The others clinked their glasses. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. They were celebrating the destruction of my father's legacy. They were toasting the termination of 400 people who had worked for this company for decades. I saw Justin from Summit lean in and whisper something to Gavin. Gavin looked over at me, pointed, and they both laughed. That laugh was all the motivation I needed. I was not just going to stop the sale. I was going to dismantle Gavin's career piece by piece. I walked over to the DJ booth. The young guy running the music was taking a break eating a slider. Do you take requests? I asked. Sure, he said. Play The Gambler by Kenny Rogers in about 10 minutes, I said, sliding a $50 note onto the table. A bit old school, isn't it? It is a classic, I said. You have to know when to hold them. I walked back into the crowd. 10 minutes later, as Gavin was middle of explaining his restructuring plan to a group of local investors, the country ballad started playing over the speaker system. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Gavin frowned, looking around the room. He tried to speak louder, but the chorus drowned him out. Know when to walk away, know when to run. I caught his eye from across the room. I did not smile. I just raised my glass of water in a silent toast. He looked annoyed, waving his hand dismissively before turning back to his conversation. He did not realize his time had already run out. I checked my phone. Sunrise Logistics Partners, verified. Ohio Freight Solutions, verified. Kramer and Associates, verified. The legal documents were registered, the shares were transferred, the trap was set. I left the gala before the music stopped. I had a long night ahead of me. I needed to assemble the files in the red folder and prepare for the morning. Tomorrow was not just a board meeting. It was a day of reckoning. I did not sleep. Sleep is for people who are not planning to reclaim a family business. I spent the night in my study, surrounded by financial ledgers, court orders, and corporate bylaws. The red folder lay open on my desk. It contained the updated shareholder registry showing my 56% control, the court-ordered ledger detailing Gavin embezzlement through Peak Technical Solutions and Ocean Blue Media, and the legal analysis of the Warner Act violations. At 6:00 a.m., I drove to a small diner on the edge of town. Sitting in a booth at the back was Mrs. Higgins, the widow of Earl who had driven a truck for my father for 30 years. She held a tiny fraction of shares, 0.05%, which my father had gifted them decades ago. Gavin had tried to buy her out last week, threatening that her shares would be worthless if she did not sell. "Roger, you look tired, son," she said. "I am fine, Mrs. Higgins. Did you bring the document?" She reached into her bag and pulled out the proxy form. "I signed it," she said. "That man, Mr. Croft, he is a liar. Your father only hired honest men. I am giving my voting rights to you." "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins," I said, taking the paper. I did not need the 0.5% for the math, but I needed it for the moral weight. I wanted Earl memory in that room. I arrived at the office at 8 a.m. I placed the red folder at the foot of the boardroom table, opposite Gavin's chair. Then I went to the break room and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. At 8:45 a.m., Gavin walked in, looking hungover and irritable. "Coffee, Roger," he barked, not slowing down. "On the warmer, Mr. Croft," I said. "Get the handouts ready and bring me some aspirin." "Yes, sir," I replied. I placed the liquidation packets at each seat. Underneath each packet, I slid a copy of the new agenda, Review of Fiduciary Negligence. The board members arrived. Davis, Miller, Howard, and Justin from Summit. Howard sat on the left, leaving the foot of the table open. Gavin took his seat at the head, slamming his briefcase down. "Let us get started," Gavin said. "We are here to vote on the strategic sale of our fleet assets to Summit." "Point of order, Mr. Chairman," I said, standing at the foot of the table. Gavin stared at me, his face turning red. "Roger, what are you doing? Fill the cups and get out." I stood my ground. "I am speaking as the representative of the majority shareholder, Red Earth Holdings, which controls 56% of the voting stock." I slid the updated registry and Mrs. Higgins' proxy down the table. The room fell completely silent. Gavin picked up the paper, his hands trembling. "This is nonsense. You are an analyst. You do not own this company." My lawyer, Sarah, entered the room, placing a folder of court orders on the table. "The transfers are fully registered, Mr. Croft," she said, "and we have a court order from the Delaware Court of Chancery compelling the disclosure of your financial records." I stepped forward, opening the red folder. "Let us discuss the $137,000 paid to Peak Technical Solutions, a dummy corporation owned by your friend Jared Duran, and the $300,000 paid to Ocean Blue Media, owned by your wife Brenda. That is corporate embezzlement." The board members shifted uncomfortably. "But there is more," I continued. "Under the Federal Warning Act 29 U.S.C., Section 2101, your plan to lay off 400 drivers without 60 days' notice would immediately expose this company to millions of dollars in class action lawsuits and federal penalties. That is a direct breach of your fiduciary duty of care. If the board votes to approve this sale, every member who votes yes will be named personally in the lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty." Davis went pale. "I did not know about this," he stammered. "I was misled." Miller agreed. "We were not informed of these liabilities." Gavin looked around the table, realizing his allies were abandoning him. "You cowards," he yelled. "I made you money." "It is over, Gavin," Howard said. "I second the motion to remove Gavin Croft as chairman for cause. All in favor?" I raised my hand. Howard raised his. One by one, Davis, Miller, and even the Summit representative raised their hands. Gavin stood up, his face purple with rage. He grabbed the glass water pitcher and threw it against the wall. It shattered, water splashing over the portrait of my father. I stood calm. I pressed the intercom. "Roy, please escort Mr. Croft from the premises. He is no longer employed here." Roy, the security guard, entered and led a shouting Gavin out of the room. I sat down in the chair at the head of the table. "The Summit deal is dead," I told the remaining members. "We are keeping the fleet. We are going back to real logistics. Peter, you are the new CFO. Fix the budget and prepare the driver raises. Peter nodded, looking determined. 3 months later, the boardroom was different. We replaced the expensive leather chairs with simple office furniture. The company was up 4% in revenue. The drivers were secure. I walked down to the break room and saw a young intern struggling with the coffee machine. "It jams if you force it," I said, helping him clear the filter. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," the kid said. "I heard you used to do this." "I still do," I said, smiling. "I just sign the checks now, too." I walked back to my father's office, sat in his chair, and looked out the window at the trucks moving in the yard. The system was running smoothly, and I knew exactly how to keep it that way.